Well, hello everyone. Welcome to another edition of One Plus One, your place for inconvenient truth-telling and myth-busting. It's another one of our All Things Africa edition. We continue to explore the history and current affairs of each African country, and we continue to explore now Southern Africa, the Southern African region. And in this episode, we look at the history and current affairs of Zambia. And who better to teach us about this country or any African country than our historical guide, our tour guide, Abayomi Azikiwe of Pan-African Newswire and Black Agenda Reports. Abayomi is a longtime historian, journalist, independent journalist, Pan-Africanist, leftist, and activist. And just before we begin, a reminder to our audience to please share widely all of One Plus One's content. Past and present episodes, our playlists help us overcome the far-right algorithms and the dominant monopoly Western corporate state media has and pseudo-leftist websites have in the social media world. By sharing our content, share us across social media and email. Please donate if you can to One Plus One at our PayPal, and if people are having trouble and would prefer an alternative form to donate, then please get in touch with me at yurismouter@gmail.com. And sometimes Facebook blocks my ability to share One Plus One. So again, please share widely. It helps the show immensely, and it's our only way of overcoming colonial, pro-imperial, sexist, heteronormative, and racist media. And on to the topic at hand. Oh, and also don't forget, folks, to help my friend Chris by becoming a Patreon to his media outlet. I collaborate a lot with him, and he's struggling at the moment. And if you help Chris out, you're helping me out. So, on to the topic at hand. So, Abayomi, as always, well, first off, welcome back to the program.
Great. It's always a pleasure.
Likewise, and loving your button up, by the way. And
Thank you.
and as always, Abayomi, tell us, what was Zambia like before it was colonized by the British, and it was known, in fact, all of Southern Africa was known as a Rhodesia. There was a Southern Rhodesia, there was a there was a Northern Rhodesia. So before Zambia became Northern Rhodesia, and there's a white supremacist Anglo-liberal capitalist whose name we will, I imagine we will be exploring a lot when we talk about Southern African nations, and that's Cecil Rhodes, who well, was considered, and still arguably is considered, an icon of British liberalism, which surprises me given his awful, hideous crimes against humanity. So, as always, tell us, what was Zambia like before it became Northern Rhodesia, a British colony?
Well, thank you once again for this opportunity to discuss African history. Prior to the British colonialism of Zambia, which then at one point was known as Northern Rhodesia, but there are other names too in which that territory is associated with, and we'll get to that later on in the program. But the human presence in that region has been traced back to anywhere between 125,000 and 300 years in terms of the fossils that have been found in the area now known as Zambia, and also human settlements that existed there that can be traced back approximately 36,000 years. And this area is categorized by the Zambezi River, which is the fourth largest river on the African continent. It's very long. It goes east all the way to the area around the Indian Ocean. It also goes west into Angola, certain sections of Angola, and also flows between modern-day Zambia and Zimbabwe as well. Victoria Falls is an important area of the Zambezi River. It's also known traditionally as Masua Tunya, which is the traditional name given to Victoria Falls. And even today, it's a major tourist attraction in the Southern Africa region.
Mm-hmm.
So Victoria Falls was named by David Livingstone, who was a Scottish explorer and missionary who helped the colonials quite a bit by exploring all these different areas and fingering various resources and human societies for conquering by the British and other colonial powers during that particular time period. There were early human societies we talked about last week. We have to keep in mind that these borders were drawn by the European imperialists during the course of the 15th through the 19th century. They were formalized in 1884 and 1885 at the Berlin Conference. Nonetheless, all of these societies overlap in regard to the designations being given during the colonial and as well as the post-colonial period. So you had, as part of the early human settlements, the San people, the Khoikhoi people, also known as the Khoisan as well. These were considered the original inhabitants of Southern and Central Africa. Also, the Batwa, the so-called Twa people, who themselves were, in fact, a part of the Congo. But the Congo, of course, borders with Zambia. So all of these people were interrelated. They conducted trade with each other. There were also migrations into the area as well by people who are designated as the Bantu, which just means people, means human beings. So the people also engaged in migration from West and Central Africa into the Southern Africa region. So all of these people intermingled, and of course, they developed civilizations during this particular time period. The so-called Bantu or the people can be traced back to 2000 to 1000 BC in that region.
Actually, Abayomi, I have to interrupt you, because this joke is now screaming in my ears. But you know how in the U.S. all of it's stolen land from the Native Americans and from from the Mexicans. And there's a joke amongst people sometimes because a lot of the names in California are Spanish. You got got San Jose over there, and you got Los Angeles. Los Angeles, of course, everybody knows L.A. as the City of Angels, and of course there's a known baseball team, the Los Angeles Angels. So when people are saying I support the Los Angeles Angels, they basically are saying I support the Angels.
Right. Okay. Yeah, right. Most definitely. Yeah. So, these are the interpretations. You go from something that was considered a designation among the indigenous people has been given a different characterization by the invaders, the slave traders, and the colonialists who came thousands of years later. But they had both hunting and gathering societies, as well as pastoralists, and also people who were involved in agricultural production, all in the same general region. So these are some of the aspects of traditional African society. They later developed copper mining. They mined gold as well as ivory, and this was the basis for trade with peoples within Africa, those along the so-called Swahili coast, which was on the Indian Ocean. Is characterized today by Tanzania, which was formerly known as Tanganyika, as well as Zanzibar, which is in the Indian Ocean off the coast of Tanzania. Now it is considered the United Republic of Tanzania. So yeah, these goods were exchanged. They also had cowrie shells was a medium of exchange, glass beads, and cloth as well. And these trading routes extended from the interior around where Zambia is, today's Congo, all the way east to the Indian Ocean. So then you had other civilizations that became more prominent. For example, Great Zimbabwe. Great Zimbabwe was not just confined to today's Republic of Zimbabwe. It also encompassed other areas throughout the region, including segments of Zambia as well. So yes, these are just some examples of the civilizations that existed prior to the advent of the British colonial system. Now, the Portuguese were also in that region, heavily along the coast of Mozambique, and they were involved in trade. But beginning around the 16th century, it became obvious that the Portuguese just weren't there to exchange goods. they had their designs on taking over the country, enslaving the people, and making them colonies. So this brought about rebellion and resistance among the African people against the Portuguese and their endeavors. The Rosvi Empire, for example, became a very militarized society. They were a breakaway from some of the other previous societies in the area. And one person, Shangmiri Dambo, defeated the Portuguese during the latter part of the 17th century, during the 1680s and 1690s. Also, other civilizations such as the Lozi or the Bharatsalan kingdom evolved between the 17th and the 19th centuries. During the 1840s, they, of course, had the migration of a Sutu-speaking group, the Makalola, and they, of course, took control of the Bharatsalan area. It exchanged control during the period of the mid 19th century. So we can see that these civilizations existed. There was resistance to the Portuguese colonialists, but eventually the Portuguese gained a dominant control, particularly around Mozambique, on the coastal areas. And after them, of course, the British came in and eventually took control.
Talk to us. What were the conditions like for the people of Zambia under British colonialism when they were known as Northern Rhodesia? And talk to us about this character who I know for a fact is going to come up a lot when we talk about Southern Africa, especially when we talk about Zimbabwe. I assume Botswana, Lesotho, South Africa, definitely. Talk to us about Cecil Rhodes.
Yeah, Cecil Rhodes was a explorer. He was a capitalist, a business person. Supposedly, he negotiated concessions with just the traditional leaders for mining in the area. Yet we know that they tricked and connived and later suppressed the indigenous people, which led to wars during the latter part of the 19th century and early part of the 20th century. A lot of the fighting was in the south of what is today known as Zimbabwe. Various traditional leaders among the Mashona as well as the Ndebele fought hard, against British occupation during that time period. Cecil Rhodes, of course, has been mythologized in many ways as someone opening up, the interior of Southern Africa. He was involved in copper mining production as well. And the area of what was later became known as Northern Rhodesia was also known as the Copper Belt. Yeah, they extracted and sold a lot of copper, and they did not give any compensation to the African miners and the African traditional leaders and societies whose land they had invaded and were exploiting. So Cecil Rhodes today, they even have a scholars named after him, scholarships, the Rhodes Scholars, but most people know that he was a vicious murderer and he had nothing positive to say or any positive policies towards the African people in Central as well as Southern Africa. But copper was a major source of the exploitation of African people during the 19th century.
Very quickly, was he what political party was he part of? Was he part of the British Tory party and depicted himself as a one nation Tory, a compassionate conservative, or was he a member of the British Liberal Party, the once dominant British Liberal Party?
Yeah, it would seem he would be with the dominant Liberal Party, although it was nothing liberal, perhaps about his policies. From the standpoint that perhaps he was distanced from the church, the Anglican Church, but no, there was nothing liberal about him or the Liberal Party of the UK. They were clearly out to take control of the people as well as the land and the resources of Central and Southern Africa.
Yeah, and in fact, here's a fun fact about the Liberal Party. Of course, the British Conservative Party, one of the most successful. Uh, some call them center right. I prefer to call them far right parties. But it's one of the most successful Western center right, far right parties, and it has the reputation of being, of course, very anti-working class, xenophobic, pro imperialist and so forth. But this is a fun fact that my friend Chris taught me when we did an episode about. When we did an episode on the eclectic radical, it was the Liberal Party of Britain that actually introduced the very vicious classist laws known as the Poor Laws. So when you read about when you read about Oliver Twist, and when you read about all these horrific conditions that the working class, the chronically unemployed, and so forth had to endure during Victorian England, and it all quote unquote formally ended with the end of World War II, it was actually the British Liberal Party that introduced those hideous classist laws and so forth. So that's
a lot of the stuff described by Charles Dickens in his books. Yeah.
Exactly. So one can only imagine how these British liberals were when it came to colonized people and whatnot. So.
Exactly. And the British had a huge colonial footprint extending from as far east as today is known as India or Hindustan, during that particular time period, all the way to places such as Thailand in the southeastern Asian region, all the way across to their influence in Iran and many other countries, Egypt, all the way into various parts of Africa, whether it's South Africa and other areas, Nigeria, for example.
Exactly. So when we talk about Zambia, then when Zambia became independent, was it one of violent ouster, violent struggle of the British towards the British, or was it a peaceful transition of power?
By no means could it have been considered a peaceful transition of power due to the vicious character of colonial control by the British over northern Rhodesia. It was so bad within the copper mining industry that in 1935, there was a strike on the part of the African copper workers, and they were demanding better pay and better working conditions. This was in 1935, at the height of the world capitalist depression. This strike was crushed, by the British and the corporations that they had been set up. For example, Anglo-American Corporation and also the British South African Company. These were the two main economic powerhouses in the Rhodesias, which facilitated the exploitation of resources and the people. Like I said, the strike was crushed, but it did bring attention to the exploitation that was being carried out by the British. There was also the formation of organizations that were demanding independence. In 1953, to restructure the colonial system in Central and Southern Africa, the British set up what was known as the Central African Federation, CAF. That was in 1953. This brought together Nyasaland, which today is known as Malawi, Northern and Southern Rhodesia. This was in 1953. And this remained in force for a decade. But this creation of the Central African Federation brought about protest and resistance on the part of the African people. So you had the formation of various organizations, for example, the Northern Rhodesia African National Congress, which was allied to other liberation movements and mass organizations throughout the region. This was during the 1950s when these struggles took place. They were involved in boycotts, mass demonstrations, and petitioning for independence of the territory. Then later, there was a dispute. Well, two figures were very, very prominent in the whole process. One is Kenneth Kaunda.
Which I'm going to
Phil
ask about,
Kaunda,
which I'm going to ask about in a bit. Yeah, go ahead.
yes, he was one of the leaders of the movement for national independence inside the country. He was also associated with Henry Nkumbula. Henry Nkumbula was a leader as well with the Northern Rhodesia African National Congress, and later the Zambian African National Congress, which Kaunda split, from the parent organization and formed a group under his leadership because he felt the other organization under the leadership of Nkumbula was not radical enough. And after they spent some time in prison together, the prison experience radicalized Kaunda, but Nkumbula became more moderate. So they eventually split politically, and eventually the United National Independence Party was formed under
Yeah.
Kaunda's leadership. And they were able to win an overwhelming majority of the support of the people in Northern Rhodesia, and eventually became the dominant force during the whole independence process. And they won the elections in 1963, 64. The country gained its independence in October of 1964.
Fascinating. Now, so now talk to us about Zambia's first democratically elected president. You already mentioned his name, Kenneth Kaunda, who I believe lived. If I'm not mistaken, I believe he lived 1924, passed away in 2021, and he was in office from October the 24th, 1964 to November the 2nd, 1991, 27 years. UNIP, the United National Independence Party, who, according to Wikipedia, their ideology is Zambian humanism, African nationalism, African socialism, Christian socialism, and Christian left, and political positions left wing. Tell us about the socioeconomic legacy of Kenneth Kaunda, the good, the bad, or the mixed bag at best. Go right ahead.
Yeah, they followed a pattern that was very much in evidence among progressive national liberation movements in Africa. They moved towards the nationalization of the key industries inside the country, for example, the copper mining industry, which had been dominated by the British multinational corporations such as Anglo American and the others. He also eventually moved towards the formation of a one party state. Many of them felt this, people like Nkrumah, Ahmed Sékou Touré of Guinea, and Nkrumah of Ghana, Julius Nyerere of Tanganyika and later Tanzania, all believed that in order to foster development, the country had to have a one party political system established, similar to what we had in the Soviet Union, China, and Cuba. So this was the program of the UNIP from 1964 all the way up to up until around 1990. Eventually, the one-party system was concretized around 1972, 1973, and that is how the system developed. It was very positive, the policies of the UNIP during its early phase in the 1960s and the 1970s. Nonetheless, of course, we had a world recession beginning in the mid-1970s, and this brought about economic hardship in Zambia, but not just in Zambian countries throughout the world. Even in the Western capitalist countries, during the mid-1970s, late 1970s, there was extreme economic distress in Western Europe and also in the United States, where you had a massive layoffs and a whole restructuring of the world capitalist system, which began around the mid-1970s. And that restructuring is continuing even 5 decades, half century later today. So this is what happened. Also, what characterized the UNIP, you talked about African humanism and socialism, African socialism, was its support for national liberation movements and independence movements throughout the entire region of Southern Africa and other parts of the continent as well. The African National Congress of South Africa had their headquarters there after it was banned and had to move out of South Africa. They had their headquarters there for many, many years. Radio
Interesting.
Freedom, which was the broadcasting wing of the ANC and the Mkhonto we Sizwe, broadcast from Lusaka, Zambia, during the 1980s. And they gave updates on the armed struggle, the mass struggle that was taking place in South Africa. SWAPO was also had a headquarters there, the Southwest Africa People's Organization, which fought for the independence of Namibia. So these are some of the groups that were there. Kaunda had good relations with Julius Nyerere of Tanzania, with Robert Mugabe, who eventually became the first prime minister and later president of Zimbabwe, which was known in the past as Southern Rhodesia.
Yep.
So yes, these are some of the aspects of the domestic as well as foreign policy of the Zambian government. They were considered to be part of the non-aligned movement, but at the same time, they tended to lean more heavily towards China and towards the national liberation movements in Africa.
That's a perfect segue then to Frederick Chiluba, November the 2nd, 1991 to January 2nd, 2002. He is the start of the long reign of the MMD, movement for multi-party democracy, now new Nation Party. How do you assess his legacy? And important to note about the MMD or NNP is, according to Wikipedia, their ideology is social democracy. But upon further reading, it also mentioned that they were advocates of the third way, the right-leaning third way, advocated by Bill Clinton, Tony Blair, and other neoliberals of the 1990s. So I don't know how you can have progressivism, but apparently reformism, is that reformism in a right wing way? And their political, but according to Wikipedia, their political positions is to center left. So how do you assess the first of many MMDs? We'll start first with Frederick Chiluba.
What happened during the 1980s was the decline in copper prices in Zambia, and this caused a lot of economic turmoil inside the country. There was a lot of dissatisfaction on the part of the workers and the people inside the country. But at the same time, you had this movement globally, particularly in Eastern Europe and the former Soviet Union, away from socialism. And in the late 1980s, you had the collapse of the socialist countries in Eastern Europe, Poland, Czechoslovakia, the German Democratic Republic, and Romania was pretty much the last one that were part of the Council of Mutual Economic Assistance. Now, Yugoslavia, under Tito, which is broken with Stalin, but they had reestablished fairly good relations after the death of Stalin and the rise of Nikita Khrushchev, and of course, after the 20th Congress of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union in 1956, where Khrushchev gave this purported secret report, not so secret because it was published in the New York Times, on the excesses of Stalinism. There was somewhat of a rapprochement between the Soviet Union and Yugoslavia. But the point I'm making is that ideologically, the movement was against socialism in Eastern Europe. All right. And then eventually in 1991, there was the collapse of the USSR, and it was done illegally. Gorbachev dissolved it. There was supposed to be a legal process for the dissolution of the USSR, but it was never carried out. It was never acknowledged. So, but this decline in socialist ideology and governance impacted the entire world. And we saw this on the African continent. And because of the deteriorating economic conditions under the post-colonial and neo-colonial phase of Africa particularly during the 1980s, there was a move towards greater reliance on the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You had the Economic Recovery Program, for example, in Ghana, beginning in the mid 1980s. Later, these structural adjustment programs, as they were renamed in Ghana and Uganda and many other countries, where the IMF and the World Bank came in once again and loaned considerable amounts of money in debt restructuring projects. And these drove down the value of the national currency. It disinvested in public services and education, in building so-called import substitution industries. So it was based upon privatization and debt refinancing. The problems with that, of course, was that it sparked mass demonstrations, and out of these mass demonstrations came the call for multi-party democracy. So
Hmm.
this impacted Zambia as well. So in 1990, they did relinquish to elements that were calling for multi-party democracy, and they held elections, multi-party elections in 1991, in which the UNIP lost miserably. And out of that came the MMD,
Yeah.
the Movement for Multi-Party Democracy, headed by trade unionist Frederick Shaluba. Now,
Trade
people,
unionist.
interesting.
Interesting.
Now, people was assuming, even some on the left, during this particular time period, um, supported the MMD, thinking it was going to bring about some type of more democratized form of socialism. It was the same problem with some leftists in the West who supported the decline of the socialist countries, the Comecon countries in Eastern Europe, and the Soviet Union,
Mm-hmm.
thinking that this would bring about a more democratized system of socialism. It did just the opposite. And that was true as well in Zambia. So
Wow.
when Shaluba got in office in 1991, he moved extremely to the right, privatizing national industries, uh, you know, walking back support for liberation movements and socialist progressive governments around the world. So the country even went down further. Plus, there was more corruption under this regime than had ever been under the UNIP of Kenneth Kaunda. So
Wow.
it moved further to the right. And this was a pattern all over the continent of Africa, that these demonstrations calling for multi-party democracy really turned out to be a fraud. And you had even greater economic problems that persisted during the 1990s and the beginning of the 2000s.
Talk to us. Same question as the last one. Talk to us about talk to us about Chaluba's successor, member of the same party, Levi Mawansawa. Apologies if I'm butchering his name. January the 2nd, 2002 to August 19th, 2008.
Yeah, well, Shaluba attempted to extend his capacity to rule the country beyond the designated frames in regard to his tenure. I just wanted to mention, too, that after the MMD got into power, the conditions worsened in Zambia. And Kaunda, former President Kenneth Kaunda, and his comrades attempted at least twice to retake power in Zambia. It did not by by force of arms. Yeah,
Oh wow. Okay.
yeah, because
That was completely missed in my research. It's
yeah, right.
interesting.
But this is what happened, and he was even detained for a period of time, along with some of his comrades. But he was eventually released. But they were not able to retake power. But there were attempts, at least two attempts, to retake power because there was so much dissatisfaction with the neoliberalism of the people who took control. There were widespread corruptions and widespread economic inefficiencies inside the country. So yes, and then after Shaluba was not able to run again, the same pattern remained under successive administrations through the 1990s and even into the 2000s.
So when we talk about the legacy of Levi Mawan Nazawa, January
Yeah.
2nd,
In
2002 to
Rwanda
August
Maza,
19th,
yeah. Hmm.
2008. When we talk about his legacy and Rupia Banza, also a member of the same party, and he's the last of the MMD NNP presidents. Uh, my question was, how do you assess their socioeconomic legacy, that of social mobility, and their tenure in power compared to successors? I guess, long story short, endless austerity with a lot of misery and more civilizational downgrade.
Exactly. And this is what the legacy remained during the 1990s and the 2000s. The country has not been able to recapture its original legacy. The anti-colonial struggle from the 1930s through the 1960s, and then the post-independence emphasis on humanism and socialism. None of that has been able to be recaptured since 1991. We're talking about some 35 years ago, and it has remained pretty much within a neoliberal framework.
It's interesting. I think leftists really need to revisit the 1990s because I think I think while culturally the 90s was quite rich in terms of movies, TV series, music like Nirvana, gangster rap, and and all the different grunge and all the different music that came out of that period, as well as the movies. I think culturally the '90s was quite a fairly good, enriching time. But my gosh, when it comes to socioeconomics and the politics that was advocated at the time, I think we really need to look back at the 90s, and I think it was even a more darker reactionary period than the 1980s, which many people think of as the root of all the
Evil.
root, the root of all evil. It certainly was the start of it, but the
Okay.
'90s, is a continuation of that because we now see an extraordinary era in Zambian politics. So Zambia's history of independence was people who, on paper, were African Marxist or radical socialists, certainly far left. Then from the '90s to mid to late early 2000s, we have supposedly a social democratic left who, along with countless Western European social democrats, Nordic social democrats, and those of Canada, Labour in Australia and New Zealand, the Green Party of Germany, has pivoted to the right on workers' rights, on education, embracing privatization of this industry or that industry, defying the base of their supports, who deem them traitors. All of this to say, as you already mentioned, this happened in Africa as well, and Zambia is no stranger. And like Tanzania and Ghana, you have leftists in power and a system that is made to help the left advance its agenda, but they come under the influence of the IMF, the World Bank. So, this chapter of Zambian history, we see now the reign of the Patriotic Front, which sounds like a right leaning to far right party. And Wikipedia says that their political positions is center left, ideology, social democracy, but socially conservative. Yuck. They are members. They are a consultative member of Socialist International, and their actual slogan, is the following: for lower taxes, more jobs, and more money in your pockets. So how do you assess the socio-economic legacy of the PF and Zambia's first leader, Michael Sata, September 23rd, 2011 to October 23rd, 2014, and then his successor from the same party, Guy Scott, October 28th, 2014 to
The
January
Scottish,
25th,
yeah.
2015, and then Edgar Lungu, January 25th, 2015 to August 14th, 2021. How do you assess all of these three gentlemen of the PF's time in office for the vast working poor in Zambia?
Yeah, I think the PF was better politically, not perfect, than the MMD. And it was interesting during that time period. We're talking about the period around 1998 really all the way up to the present, there was extreme pressure on the government in the Republic of Zimbabwe under President Robert Mugabe. And even during the 2000s, particularly the late 2000s, there was tremendous pressure on the part of the Zambian government to openly attack Zimbabwe. I mean,
Hmm.
politically, at AU meetings and all of this. Now, this never happened, but there was tremendous pressure on them to do so. So I think under Michael Sata and Edgar Lungo, there was a better position in regard to their relationships with the Republic of Zimbabwe, which was under the Zimbabwe African National Union, Patriotic Front. And of course, the land reform program in 2000 generated a lot of controversy in the West.
Yeah.
People were calling for a British invasion to airlift the British settlers who controlled most of the land, to airlift them out of the country or to try to attempt to overthrow the government. So you had sanctions and other measures that were implemented in order to weaken the ZANU-PF government and bring about the ouster of Mugabe. Now, he eventually was overthrown in a palace coup, more or less, in 2017. But we're talking about years before this, the early 2000s. They were saying all the elections were corrupt and that Mugabe was a dictator and so forth. Now, this was even echoed by putative leftists in Britain as well as in the United States.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
I know all about that, and there was a period of time where I even believed that strongly. So yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah. So, I mean, the propaganda was really intense. And they were even denigrating the land reform program in Zimbabwe, saying it was just done for the purpose of corruption, that it wasn't a genuine land reform program and so forth. But in Zambia, there tended to be a more of a moderating position under the PF, although there were other problems associated with the Zambian Patriotic Front. And about 8 years ago, well, 7 or 8 years ago, there was the formation of the Socialist Party of Zambia. And
Mm-hmm.
that gave people some hope. But then later, it was discovered that they were, supporting the opposition in Zimbabwe, which was backed, by the US and by Britain and the European Union. So I'm not clear at this point what the real politics are of the Socialist Party of Zambia, but they do exist. I don't think they've made a huge headway politically
and and
inside
and
the
and and
country.
and they and they explicitly market themselves as communist, Marxist, Leninist, or
Socialists, I don't think they consider themselves Marxist Leninists, but it was interesting that they decided to support, this obviously right wing opposition grouping inside of Zimbabwe during the last period of elections and other activities. So who knows what's going to happen in the near future?
but what of social mobility, literacy, and life expectancy for the vast working class, working poor, very small precarious middle class during the time of PF in office in Zambia.
Yeah, it's about the same. They have issues, related to productivity inside the country, ongoing debt, and which has been refinanced on numerous occasions by successive administrations. So yes, there are problems. Uh, the educational system there, which was being built up under the UNIP under President Kenneth Kaunda, there's not as much investment within higher education and primary and secondary education as it was during the 1960s, 70s, and 1980s. So yes, they still have economic problems. Zambia is a part of the Southern African Development Community. They're one of the founding members of that regional organization. And they do promote regional trade throughout the entire what they consider to be the area of the subcontinent, is what it's called, meaning the southern region of Africa. The SADC SADC is composed of 16 different independent states
Hmm.
from the DRC to the north, east in the Indian Ocean. You have Mauritius, that is a part of it as well, the Union of Comoros, all the way down through Zambia, Zimbabwe, Mozambique, Angola, Botswana, Lesotho, Namibia, and the Republic of South Africa. So it's a pretty extensive federation, and Zambia is a part of that. Now, Lungo died last year, and there's still some conflict over. He died in South Africa, whether or not to bring him back to Zambia for a state funeral. His family opposes that, whereas the government says, because he was a head of state, that he should be buried in Zambia. So I don't think that's still been resolved as of yet.
Why? What reasons does his family give for not wanting, a state funeral?
I think it's because of the disagreements with the existing administration in
Ah,
Zambia.
okay.
Yeah,
Then that's a perfect segue to this question, which is
right.
so since August 24th, 2021, Zambia has been under the leadership of Hakainde Hichilema, apologies if I'm butchering his name, who is not from any paper left or left-leaning parties. The current president and his political party hail from the United Party for National Development, which was founded by Anderson Mazuka, former executive of the Anglo-American Corporation, which you've talked about, a major mining company. And according to Wikipedia, the UPND positions itself as a centrist party with strong ideological commitments to social and economic liberalism, advocating for policies that supports free market principles, human rights, and democratic governance. The party receives its highest support from rural regions of the country, and according to Wikipedia, their political positions is center right, their ideology, liberalism and agrarianism. They are parts of Liberal International's African wide branch, the Africa Liberal Network, and Liberal International's members. These are all these, kind of like soft right-wing parties and so forth. One of the major global right-wing organizations. This is where you find soft right-wingers, like the MR, like the MR, Walloon Centre Right Party in Belgium, the VVD of Holland, Fianna Fáil of Ireland, the ghastly Future Movement of Lebanon, where the Hariris hail from, the National Liberal Party of Romania. And, when you hear of a liberal party from the Nordic countries or Eastern Europe or whatever African party, they're pro-capitalist, pretty neoliberal in the end. And, not the kind of FDR New Deal or LBJ Great Society kind of liberal. And, of course, the Liberal Party of Canada is a leading member of this organization. So all that said, how is Zambia faring under this right-wing government at the moment?
Well, they're still struggling. And because of the drought, the periodic climate problems associated with the entire Southern Africa region, it's still problematic. And they still have not been able to turn the corner in regard to genuine economic development inside the country. The politics, even though they're a part of the Southern African Development Community, it still has not moved back towards a socialist orientation that favors the workers, the youth, women, and the farmers inside of Zambia.
And I'll ask this question again, since we still have some time. What was Zambia's place in the Cold War? You already mentioned that it was non-aligned, but it leaned more towards the Soviets, Cubans, and the Eastern Bloc nations. Did
And
it
China
ever?
too, yeah.
Did it ever? Oh, China as well. Did it ever have strategic partnerships with the U.S., UK, Canada, and the Western Imperial Camp? And I asked this question because Zambia is the British monarch still head of state? Are they a member of the Commonwealth or not at all? I'm curious your response.
Yeah, I think they still are a member of it,
Okay.
but at the same time, they're a republic. So that would make the president as the head of state and
Okay.
not
Okay. So
the monarchy in the Commonwealth, England, for
okay.
example. Like a lot of countries in the Caribbean are trying to break away from that. Like Barbados, for example, is one of them. Jamaica has talked about this, but who knows? There's so much pressure on these states to conform.
Yeah.
Like for example, in Trinidad and Tobago, as well as Jamaica, they're expelling Cuban healthcare workers just under the pressure of U.S. imperialism. So
Hmm.
that has not happened in Southern Africa, to my knowledge. That they still have good relations with Cuba. They still have a Cuban embassy in Zambia. So yes.
And what are Zambia's relations with yeah? What are Zambia's relations with BRICS, either collectively or with individual members of BRICS?
Yeah, I don't think they have a formal relationship with BRICS. I believe that they would definitely be interested in establishing relations, and but its economy right now is in a situation where I don't think it would be feasible for
Oh,
them to
actually,
join.
Abayomi, one moment.
Okay.
Sorry about that. Sorry about that. Somebody was calling me.
Okay.
But yeah, continue with what you were
Yeah, I was
saying.
just saying that the AU as a whole is very much interested in the Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa Plus summit. And because despite the fact that BRICS is categorized by countries with differing social systems, they still talk about the need for de-dollarization and multilateralism, which is a threat to U.S. imperialism, as well as the European Union.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so that is the problem that the U.S. imperialists have with BRICS. And this underlies the reasons behind this assault on the Islamic Republic of Iran by the Zionist entity and the U.S., as well as the attacks on Iran, as well as the attacks on Lebanon, which is being devastated right now as we speak. So all of this is related because they want to maintain U.S. Dominance and imperialist dominance emanating from Washington, Wall Street, London, Paris, Brussels, etc. So this underlines the aggressive posture that the United States has towards the Islamic Republic of Iran, their allies throughout the entire region. And that has to be viewed within the context of the move towards de-dollarization and multilateralism. Now, multilateralism may not sound all that radical and revolutionary,
Hmm.
but it does conflict with what the United States is attempting to do. And that is, of course, reassert their imperialist dominance over the entire world, even reconfiguring their alliance with the UK and the European Union, demanding that they spend at least 5% of their national annual budget on defense. So there's a lot of pressure on them. And some claim they're siding with Trump and the current US administration. For example, the Secretary General of NATO spoke a couple of days ago, Rutte,
Yeah, Mark
and
Rutte of the VVD party that I just mentioned.
yes.
Very pro austerity, very far right, and yeah.
Mm-hmm. And they asked him, in the press conference, was he insulted, by what Trump was saying about NATO? And he ducked the question. He would not answer the question. And it's the same situation with Sir Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister for the Labour Party over Britain. They asked him, was he insulted by Trump calling him weak, that he was no Churchill, et cetera, which is absurd anyway, because Churchill was responding to the bombing of London and England by the Nazis
Hmm.
and the attempt to take over the UK. There's no attempt by the Islamic Republic to take over uh, the United Kingdom, none whatsoever, or any other European countries. So this is, but they don't want to mention, they don't want to say this because they don't want to totally break with U.S. imperialism. But
Exactly.
this is what's going on, and that's why BRICS is a threat. And of course, the African Union as a whole is compelled to move in that direction, but they're under enormous pressure by U.S. imperialism to move back even further into the camp of Washington and Wall Street.
And what's been Zambia's response to the anti-French African Spring? And the left in Zambia, I'm very curious. Are a lot of them mobilizing against AFRICOM and wanting AFRICOM to be shut down across the continent?
I have not seen that. Um, the Socialist Party of Zambia comes across as an opposition party, but at the same time, in terms of its international positions, um, I have grave doubts that they have good positions related to international questions. For example, Palestine is a good example. Now, even under Edgar Lungu, maybe 8 years ago or longer, maybe a decade ago, he had attended a swearing in ceremony for, I believe it was Kenyatta in Kenya during
Mm-hmm.
his second term. And attending that ceremony was, of course, Benjamin Netanyahu from the Zionist state of Israel.
Yeah.
And there was a conversation, from what I read, that Netanyahu had asked Lungo to host a Africa-Israeli summit. Now, we know about the China-Africa summit, the FOCAC, the Forum on China-Africa Relations. So he wanted to do something similar in Zambia. And it appeared as if Lungo may have been open to the idea. Well, myself personally wrote an extensive article saying that the government of Zambia has to clarify its position on whether or not they're going to host the Israeli Africa Summit in Lusaka. And that article wound up on the front page of the Lusaka Times, interestingly enough. And nothing,
Wow.
no more was ever heard about it. It was a similar proposal with Togo in West Africa, which is a former French colony as well. And then a rebellion broke out in the country, not necessarily about their relations with Israel, but about the economic situation and the political crisis that was in existence in Togo. This was around 2016, 2017. And that has gone away as well. So I think what the Zambian government is concerned about is maintaining stability inside the country. But the Zionists are doing, and the Americans have other methods that they're using, trying to counter interests in forming alliances with the Russian Federation to undermine China's role in Africa and others as well. So it's an ongoing struggle that's taking place. It's more like a new Cold War,
Yeah.
against the Russian Federation, against the People's Republic of China, against the Islamic Republic of Iran. All of these countries and world powers are considered a threat. The U.S. imperialism, as well as the UK and the European Union. But Zambia, based upon its vastness and its mineral wealth, if they had a stable political system that was progressive, could make a tremendous contribution to the unity and independence of Africa, as they did during the 1960s, 70s, and 80s.
Final question is the following. Lastly, despite having many left-wing or supposedly left-leaning governments in the past, if Zambia really wanted to eradicate the very visible nationwide extreme poverty that continues to plague the country and really build social mobility and the horrible statistics of child infant mortality. Life expectancy is still in the 40s, 50s maximum. And there has been betrayals that the left has done in the past. But the only way to address these intergenerational problems is through radical socialism, Pan-African leftism, radical workers' rights, Marxism even. And yes, your response to that before we
Yeah,
close.
that is correct. But these governments and political parties who have authority will have to confront U.S. imperialism. And that is the bottom line. And if they're not willing to do that, because there's huge prices to pay. I mean, look at what has happened in other states. What happened in Ghana during 1966, 60 years ago. They engineered the overthrow of the Convention People's Party government under Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, who was the first president and prime minister of the Gold Coast, later known as Ghana. What has happened in other states, the attacks on Gamal Abdel Nasser in Egypt during the 1950s and 1960s. Tanzania, the problems they had when they were under the Ujamaa socialist system. So, in order to do that, you have to confront imperialism. And confronting imperialism, there's a huge cost that could be exacted by them because they have to trade with these people. And also, they have mechanisms of buying off people, infiltrating state structures. So, it's a major issue, not just in Zambia, but throughout the entire continent of Africa. So the struggle continues, and there are many methods that have been utilized, even in the progressive states right now. For example, the Alliance of Sahel States. They're under tremendous pressure in regard to their security. They have funded these rebel groups in Mali, in Niger, as well as Burkina Faso, to fight against any progressive moves that are being made, by the AES leadership in Mali, in Niger, as well as Burkina Faso.
Fascinating. So, as you mentioned, the struggle continues, and it's a that's why we also have to plug organizations like the Black Alliance for Peace. So, and get
Yeah,
other branches involved internationally. Well, we were joined on this edition of One Plus One, learning all about Zambia with our historical guide, Abayomi Azikiwe of Pan-African Newswire and Black Agenda Reports. A reminder, folks, Abayomi is a longtime historian, journalist, and Pan-Africanist leftist activist. And just before we close again. A reminder to our audience to please share widely all of One Plus One's content, past and present episodes, our playlists. I've recently created even more new playlists of our greatest hits and other informative content. Again, help us overcome the far right algorithms and the dominant monopoly Western corporate state media and pseudo leftist websites have in the social media world by sharing our content widely. And again, donate to One Plus One at our PayPal, YouriSmile@gmail.com if you would like a different form of payment. It's our only way to overcome all of these right-wing outlets. And again, urgent reminder, folks, please, if you can, become a paid Patreon to my friend Chris Richards. Chris hosts The Eclectic Radical. I'm a frequent guest, and I sometimes co-host the show there. And he's been on the show, 3 times now. And Chris lost his job, and he's struggling. He takes care of his wife, who struggles with diabetes. Everyone knows how scary it is when one loses their job in the U.S. and don't find one quickly. So please, people, if you can, become a Patreon. And check out, his work. The more you donate, it means that me and Chris, we can do more on-the-ground journalism and more in-person interviews and so forth. So become a regular donor to his Patreon or to my PayPal. And I can tell you, it's money better spent than the overpriced streaming services. And you can give up Spotify because YouTube has all the free music anyways. So please do that if you can. All my best until then. Have a great weekend, folks. And next week, join Abayomi and myself because the next country we're going to be exploring in Southern Africa is Malawi. All my best. And again, folks, good night and good luck.